to Talks at Google. It's so lovely to see everybody's faces here. I'm Michelle Palaganis. I'm a business partner for the music discovery teams and trust and safety teams for YouTube. And I'm super honored to be representing the Filipino Googler Network. Yes! The Filipino Googler Network is an employee resource group here at Google. And I'm super excited as well to be hosting this talk for all of you. It's going to be super amazing, and we have the stars of the historic Broadway musical, Here Lies Love. Woo! This musical was directed by Tony Award winner for Moulin Rouge, Alex Timbers. Here Lies Love transforms the Broadway theater into Club Millennium, where the cast tells the story of the rise and fall of Imelda Marcos. The musical features a score by Grammy, Tony, and Oscar winner David Byrne, and Grammy Award winner Fatboy Slim, with concept and lyrics by David Byrne, which in one interview he actually said that it took him 30 years for the first thought of the musical to it actually being on Broadway, so it's quite a feat. Let's not forget to mention that this is the first time in Broadway's history that there is a Filipino story being told on the Broadway stage by a full Filipino cast. I'm so, so proud. Amazing. And there's co-producers like Lea Salonga, her, Joe Coy, Apple the App. This musical is innovative, it's shocking, it's immersive, and it takes us on a 40-year journey of Imelda Marcos and the events that led up to the People Power Revolution. All this is told through disco pop, and it gives us all, whoever is involved or who's ever in the audience, this kind of disco party vibe. We're going to start our talk today with a little sizzle reel, so you'll get to know what I mean by when I say party vibe. And we'll also have a couple performances from our stars. Yes. But before we get started, I wanted to remind everybody that we will have time for questions at the end. So if you have any questions, if you're watching on live stream, please put them in the chat. And if you're in the room, please step up to the mic. They're there and there. All right, so let's see what the Broadway theater looks like and feels like 8 times a week on Broadway. Let's roll the clip. And it feels so appropriate in this space because we've got velvet curtains back here. Just felt like home. So first off, I would like to talk about our first performer, Arielle Jacobs. Woo! Yes, right? Is she amazing? Arielle plays Imelda Marcos and has starred on Broadway as the Princess Jasmine in Disney's Aladdin, the hit musical Wicked, and played Nina Rosario in the final cast of the 4-time Tony and Grammy Award-winning musical In the Heights. She originated roles and has performed in Australia and in national tours, and most recently starred off-Broadway as Delilah McPhee in the original cast of Between the Lines. But for your dog lovers out there, she created a foundation called the Broadway Pup, where 100 of the proceeds of these beautiful, luxurious bandanas for dogs goes to animal shelters and charities across the country. So be on the lookout, BroadwayPup.com. But today, she will be performing for us the title song, Here Lies Love. So welcome to the stage, Arielle Jacobs!
whose dresses are all hand-me-downs and scraps. I'd see the people smile when I would sing for them. How happy they all seem when I would dance. The most important things are love and beauty. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. To prosper and to fly, a basic human right. The feeling in your heart that you're secure. Is it a sin to love too much? Is it a sin to care? I do it all for you. How can it be unfair? I know that when my number's up, when I am called by God above, don't have my name inscribed into the stone. Just say, here lies love, here lies love, here lies love. We live a stone's throw from the palace, a simple country girl who has a dream. The ladies passing by, a better class than I. How much it means to me to be like these. At least we have each other. The neighbors pass us food. No clothes, no bed, no jewelry. Sometimes I had no shoes. Is it a sin to love too much? Is it a sin to care? I do it all for you. How can it be unfair? I know that when my number's up, when I am called by God above, don't have my name inscribed into the stone. Just say, here lies love, here lies love, here lies love. Just say, here lies love, here lies love, here lies love.
Isn't she amazing? Thank you so much. All right, next we will have Jose Llana come up on stage, who plays Ferdinand Marcos in Here Lies Love, a role that he's reprised from the Public Theater, where he received a Lortel nomination for Best Actor. Some of his Broadway roles include The King and I, the 25th Annual Putnam County Spelling Bee, Wonderland, Flower Drum Song, Rent, Street Corner Symphony, and The King and I, again. His Broadway shows include Saturn Returns on the Town and Twelfth Night. He will be performing for us A Perfect Hand, which we can also hear on the original cast album on all the streaming platforms. So with that, here's Jose.
They occupied our country. We were almost overrun. I knew if I did not react, they'd kill us, everyone. I promised to my mother, she meant so much to me, that for every single tear she shed, there'd be a victory. That for every single tear she shed, there'd be a victory. Who's holding aces and who's gonna fold, and who's got a secret and who's feeling bold? It's a winning combination. If a lady understands that the king and the queen of hearts could be a perfect hand, that the king and the queen of hearts could be a perfect hand. So know what you are holding, but be prepared to bluff. There are many ways to win a game, but skill is not enough. There are many ways to win a game, but skill is not enough. Who's holding aces and who's gonna fold, and who's got a secret and who's feeling bold? It's a winning combination. If a lady understands that the king and the queen of hearts could be a perfect hand, that the king and the queen of hearts could be a perfect hand.
Hello. I'm going to sing one more song. And I just decided to do this morning. So, but I really wanted to give you all a taste of the full spectrum of our show, because it is a party at first, of course, but then it really turns into something very powerful and important towards the end. So the first song that I sang was when Imelda's very young. She's 16. And she has these big dreams. And then this song is about halfway through our show. And she has been betrayed by 2 different men. And she has now made the choice in this song. You'll see that she makes the choice to really do something about that and to take full control of her destiny.
Last night I had a dream that I was back in Leyte. I dreamed I was barely alive, but I could still see. Then a woman in white approached my bed, this Egyptian queen. She could raise the dead, and a crowd of people, they were praying in there for me. And this crowd of people, they were singing their songs for me. And I can feel it now, their faith and affection. Feel that I am their Pygmalion now. I sit up in the dream, I rise and I come back to the river of life, and I rejoin the river of life. And now my personal life, that old life is over, and I'll serve my country for the rest of my days. And I thank God we know how to make money. Now I am the people's star and a slave. Now it's because of you that happiness lives here. Every step that I take, everything that I do, and your love for me I will treasure forever. So I'll give you my love. Now it's my turn to say that if it is true that you shall enslave me, well, it's because of you nothing can stand in my way. Let me be your star and slave, and my personal life, when they've taken away, I can't be hurt anymore by those things that they say. Let it come, let it come, let it come what may. Let me be your star and slave.
Oh my gosh, wasn't that amazing? Thank you so much for doing that. That was such a special treat. Such talent on this stage. I'm so proud and so happy that they're here. So now, let's bring them on the stage. Come on up. Arielle Jacobs and Jose Llana. Woo! Hi. Have a seat. It's very comfy, huh? I know you gave us a little bit about what the story is, but can you give us a little bit more detail about how the story starts and where it goes?
Absolutely, yeah. So Here Lies Love starts when Imelda is 16 years old. And it's really about the rise and fall of a dictator, the rise and deposition of these two people who came to power in the Philippines, and then the heroic people of the Philippines who actually stood up against them and during the People Power Revolution and took back their democracy 40 years later. Well, yeah, 40 years. Right. Of the show.
With a peaceful protest
and
as well.
And it's a 90-minute show, and it's completely immersive. What's so thrilling about it is that Imelda really loved to, her world was discos. So if you think about why is this story a disco? It's actually because that was her world. That was the world where she really had people in her orbit, where she really made an impact and changed politics, and so there's a reason for the disco. She had a disco ball in the roof of her townhouse, so there's that correlation there, and also because the disco in our show serves a bigger purpose, and it's really this whole story is about giving the audience the experience of what it's like to be taken on this ride and to experience what it's like when you're following a person who might become a populist dictator. It often feels like you're in a party. It often feels very exciting and energetic. And so the disco really emphasizes that. And then by the end of the show, when that gets stripped away, you feel the difference between what that was like and then what the real heart of our story is at the end.
Well said.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people were like, why a disco? But if you really think about it and you really think about Imelda and who she was, the disco just makes sense, right? Oh, so amazing. Jose, you've been with the musical since the beginning. What was it? 2013?
The first workshop was in 2011.
Oh, 2011.
We had workshops for 2 years until we had our first out-of-town production. Our first experimental production was at the Williamstown Theater Festival at Massamoka in 2012. And then we brought it to Off-Broadway at the Public Theater in 2013.
So since the beginning and until now, has the show, the staging, how's it evolved?
It's evolved in the sense that, so the original concept album, when David Byrne and Fatboy Slim wrote this piece, like the concept album, which is available out, like it was mostly focused on Imelda and Estrella, who was her maid and her basically her mother figure, and so it was really a conversation between the two of them a lot on the album. And Marcos only makes one appearance on that original concept album, and there's no Aquino on that original concept album. And when they brought it to the Public Theater and Alex Timbers became involved, and we're forming it into a theater piece. And we had 3 workshops in New York City between 2011 and 2013 where we basically worked on the first third, middle third, and the last third of the show. And they realized very quickly that the story they wanted to tell, if they wanted to tell the whole story about the beginning, middle, and end of the regime, you needed to bring Aquino in more and have him be a much stronger player. So those are kind of the 4 principles of the show in the sense that that was the biggest shift. And David Byrne went home and wrote all these songs for Aquino, and he is a very important, obviously, antagonist feature in terms of the storyline and the very important storyline that is the counter to this, this great seduction that Imelda and our job is to show that the Marcoses succeeded in seducing the country and then succeeded in taking that trust and running with it and completely betraying that trust entirely. And Aquino's character became very important. So that was the biggest shift in those workshop processes.
I mean, it makes sense. Like the 3 of them are so intertwined. Like. And he needs to be there, but also to be kind of the voice of the people in the story. Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, as the story progresses, like that's why the 3 of us are on the cover of the poster. It's like we're not just telling the story of the Marxes. We're actually telling the story of Aquino and how, Corey is on, who became the president after Marcos. The Marcos were taken away. She makes an appearance on our show, but just as Aquino's wife, So it's powerful. We'll talk about it some more. I grew up with all this. I was 7 when Aquino was assassinated. I moved here. I was born in martial law in the Philippines. So there's a very personal story for all the Filipinos in the cast. Speaking of which, how did you? So what was that conversation like? We were like, Mom, Dad, guess what? I got this role. I was playing, Ferdinand Marcos. Yeah. What was that conversation like? Bizarre. Just to give background. So I was born in martial law in Manila in 76, and my mom and dad were like the heart of the baby boomers. So my mom and dad were in college, 65 to 69. They were part of those protest rallies against the Marcoses, and we moved out of the Philippines in 79 to come to America. But we moved to a very Filipino-American community in Northern Virginia. And we were raised, my ate and I, my older sister, my sister and I were raised with a full understanding of why we left and what martial law was. And my parents were members of all the Filipino-American community organizations here that were sending money back to the Philippines to help the movement. And so that's the background, right? And so, and so in 2011, I was closing a show on Broadway, and I caught wind of this workshop happening downtown that someone told me they're doing this musical based on Imelda Marcos, and Alex Timbers is directing it, and David Byrne wrote. I'm like, David Byrne of Talking Heads wrote a musical about Imelda Marcos, like. That sounds like a weird dream that someone had and said that could never happen. And I called my agent. I said, I want to get in that door. And I walked into that room and I said, hello, my name is Jose Llana. I'm the son of anti-Marcos activists, and I am here to play your Aquino. Right? And they said, well, you came in here with such a bravado. Can you take a look at the Marcos character, please? And so when I told my parents I was going to be part of this workshop of this new musical, they were very kind of like, really? And you're playing him? It was him.
You're playing him. And I told him, I said, I'm going to be a part of this, but I'm going to tell them from day one, I'm not going to be a part of something that's going to glorify them in any way. But what was important was that we're telling the story so that people learn from history and learn that when you pick a popular president and you put your trust in them, you have to be able to acknowledge that when they take that trust, when they start getting used to that power and don't want to give that power away, and they betray that trust, you have to vote them out, and you have to find a way to get them out. And I think the problem with the last 40 years, 50 years, is that people have forgotten, and I think that's where we found ourselves in the Philippines right now.
So that's all they said? Why are you playing him?
Yeah, and again, that was the first workshop, and there was a second workshop, and from day one with David Byrne and Alex Timbers, there was an instant understanding. Like they were obviously, because David was so inspired by the People Power Revolution, he knew that's where the story needed to go and needed to end. But you have to start the story in a place where that ending makes sense. You know what I mean? And I understand it. I mean, we'll get into the political conversation right away, but like when we talk about martial law, it's trauma. And it's a trauma that the Filipino people lived through, and there are still people alive today who lived through that trauma, like with vivid memory of it. I have a godmother who was picked up by the police and disappeared for 7 months, and then came back, and she was never the same. Yeah. So I can understand why people, when they find out that there's this Imelda Marcos musical happening, that they don't necessarily, and they see these flashy posters. But I think what's important is that we tell the story, and that people come and remember that it happened. Because I think right now there's a lot of misinformation happening, and social media is taking the narrative, and there are a lot of young people a lot of young Filipino people, both in the Philippines and all over the world, who have not been told the history of martial law, and that's a big mistake.
Yeah, it's such a contemporary topic, right? It just happened 40, 50 years ago. And again, there's lots of families here. I know a lot of us are first generation here in the U.S. where our families were involved, or my families were affected by the whole, People Power Revolution and martial law. And I think they're still scared to talk about it.
Absolutely.
So, and I think that the show is a great jumping off point to open up that conversation. I know I've had this conversation with my husband because he's Filipino as well. But like we never talk about it. I know that my parents never talked about it with me, and how, Marcos and the assassination, how that affected him. I
mean, we always say that the Filipinos, we are the masters of assimilation, right? We've been colonized so many times by different countries that we as a people have collectively learned to move on, to kind of not look back, and leave things behind, to leave the trauma behind, and go forward and move forward. And there's healing in that. I grew up with so many Filipino friends who stopped speaking Tagalog at home because their parents were like, "Nope, you're speaking English. No more. We're Americans now. You look forward, don't look back." And there's healing in that, but there's also a real fear that you're going to lose a lot of your history if you don't look back and learn from the past.
Yeah, isn't there a saying that if you don't know where you came from, then how do you get where you're going?
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. We all have our stories. The relationship between the U.S. and the Philippines is complex, to say the least. And we all can talk about, different things that have happened and that we bring, and every individual family has their own story. Arielle, do you mind telling us a little bit about your family's history, about coming from the Philippines and coming to the U.S.?
Yeah, for sure. So my grandfather, he's still alive. He's about to turn 98.
Woo! Oh my God, my grandmother and your grandfather the same age.
Yeah. And he and his wife, my grandparents are both from the Philippines, but my grandfather was born there in the 1920s when it was still an American colony. And in World War II, he became a Philippine scout in World War II. And at the time, the U.S. was promising American citizenship to all of the Filipinos who fought with them in World War II. And then after the war ended, unfortunately, that did not come to pass. The promise wasn't kept. So my grandfather, as diligent as he is, he decided that he was going to fight for American citizenship. And he wrote to different U.S. senators for 13 years, every single week for 13 years. And him and my grandmother and my mom and her brother and sister, eventually their luck changed because in 1965, there was a new Immigration Act passed that allowed more people to come from multiple different countries into the U.S. And because of his letters, I believe, my family was the first to come from the Philippines under this new act to America. So we were very fortunate. And just a few years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago now, he was awarded a U.S. Congressional Gold Medal from America for his service as a Philippine Scout.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And I'm sure the reason why you wanted to bring his family to America was to have better opportunities and a better life.
Yes.
Do you think that he ever thought that your opportunity would be to play Imelda Marcos
No.
in an all-Filipino cast on Broadway?
I don't think he ever anticipated that. When I told him I was playing Imelda Marcos, I said, "You remember Imelda Marcos?" He said, "The dictator."
I can hear that. I can hear that. Yeah, I mean, like, that's basically what the American dream is about. Like, coming here and being able to do whatever you want and see where the road takes you. And this is where it's taking you. And it's quite amazing. It's quite amazing. Well, let's now get into your creative process. I'd love to hear how you prepared for these roles. Like, what did you do? What was that process like?
Well, so I auditioned for this. You've been a part of it for so long. I auditioned for it. Just my first one was in December of last year, and the audition and callback process took about 3 months. And I had to sing 6 songs from the show. I had to do two dance numbers and a monologue that's not in our show, but is actually taken from a documentary called Imelda. And so it was in this documentary, Imelda is speaking about numerology and the different ways that humans and philosophy and religion and society can grow together. And it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense when you read it, but when I was doing this audition process, I think that the note was, imagine you're giving a speech to the United Nations, and this is what you say. So there was, for me, a lot of my research was about how to completely hold a room and hold space and hold belief in everything I'm saying with so much charisma and so much power and so much presence that everyone in this room will absolutely believe everything that I'm saying, even if it doesn't make any sense. So there was a lot of character work that had to go into that. And I'm still learning so much. I'm reading books and learning so much about her history and figuring out what's real and what's not, because a lot of the history that has come out about Imelda is misinformation, and some of it you have to kind of figure out what's true and what's not. So learning and taking from the stories, I think that things that helped my performance of her was a lot from her childhood and some stuff that's not in our show at all. Learning about how her mother died when she was very young and she didn't have a mother figure, and how she was betrayed by the men around her, but also how she learned to manipulate people at a very young age was also a big part of my research.
So I had a lot of time, because that first workshop in 2011, when I started that first workshop, so much of what I knew was from my parents' perspective and having lived through martial law. And when I started doing research, it became very clear that it was going to be very difficult because, like all happy dictators, many of the things written about him and for him and by him were all false. like when I would find a source and read a book about him, I would have to do research on who wrote that book and how that person was connected to Marcos, and whether they were saying all the mistruths were from the get-go. Even Marcos's history in his campaign for president in 1965, he wasn't a war hero. You know, I mean, there's so many falsehoods that were around him his entire life.
In his journal.
And then one of the best things I read, where he wrote this book, he kept a journal, you know, about knowing that it was going to be discovered and knowing that people were going to read it. This guy, he would write in his journal and change dates and names and numbers, knowing that it was going to be read by somebody in the future, because he had that big an ego to him, knowing that. And so even reading his journal, you have to fact check his journal, because you don't know what's going on. And so that was what a lot of the research I did for the first production 10 years ago was just obviously just historical research, and a lot of the documentaries that were out are really great. But coming back to the part 10 years later with this Broadway production, I actually kind of shifted my focus. Rather than focusing on Marcos's history, I kind of just did a lot more research on wannabe dictators and contemporary characters today like Trump and Putin, and people who are power hungry, have a really bizarre grasp of truth, people who are so obsessed with power that they invent this bubble of truth around them that they believe that isn't necessarily what the truth is, and understanding that the core of who Marcos was ego, and this mansplaining ego energy is not hard to find comparisons around the world right now.
I also think that Imelda and Ferdinand they found each other because they were the same in a lot of ways. And one of the things Imelda said in her latest documentary that was made about her, called The Kingmaker, was, perception is real, the truth is not.
Right. Wow. Isn't that a great way to live?
Yeah. Yes. I must say that because of your research and because of your process, you guys are so powerful on stage. Like, you portray these roles and you feel that presence. And when you talk about, you know, how to control a room, you definitely control the room. Like, you can see it in the sizzle reel, right? Like, you just have that aura about you. But also, you know, playing such a complex part as Ferdinand is difficult. And you do it very, very well. So thank you. So I saw the show last Sunday. And when I was in the lobby with my girlfriend, Fran, we met this young girl, and she, maybe early 20s, and she walked up to us and she's like, "How many times have you seen the show?" "I've seen it over 1,000,000 times. No, over 10 times is what she said. And she was so sweet. She's like, "Oh, I'm so sad that it's ending," and all of this. And she's like, "Are you gonna see it on the floor?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll see it on the floor." It's like, "I'll see you there." I'm like, "Okay." And so we're on the floor. And at the end, there's this really, really powerful song sang by Moses Villarma. Right, that's his last name. Whew. And she was standing right in the middle of the stage, right in front, like chin up to the bottom of the stage, crying, like bawling. And I'm like, I didn't know how to feel about it, because I was like, I could take this in a couple ways. I can take it as, she's crying because she's so touched. Like, the performance is so great. She's crying because this is part of her history and this has happened to her family or her people. She's crying because she doesn't want to see the show end. It could be taken in multiple ways, but she's bawling. What do you feel, or what do you feel when you see things like that in the audience, and you see people who are Filipino and not Filipino all just bawling at the end of the show? Like, how does that make you feel, and like, what do you want the audience to take away from the show?
I mean, it's beautiful. It's cathartic. I think, not to give it away. Yes, let's give it away. Let's talk about it. So there's a moment in the show. There's a reason why that song exists. Obviously, it's a song that our DJ sings. To sort of, and it's every word in the song were words uttered by people in the People Power Revolution. They were interviewed.
And the entire show, I do want to say, 95% of the lyrics in this show are taken from real testimony. The characters, like Imelda's real words, her speeches, her books, things that she said in documentaries. A lot of the most of the lyrics, 90%, are actual real words, and then David Byrne put music to them. But that also is very important, because it just means that these words and these stories are from actual Filipinos in the Philippines.
But that moment at the end of the show, and I think the end of the show has lots of relevance in many ways, and I'm going to get music nerdy on you too. Like that, the whole show, 90% of the show is this disco. It's this synthetic, artificial sound with flashy disco lights. Just you're kind of overwhelmed with it, and it's sexy and it's flirty and it's everything the Marcoses wanted you to feel and believe, while they stole all the money from under your nose, right? And when they're finally pushed out, and this is exactly after Imelda leaves the stage and she's helicoptered out, the way that the Marcoses were helicoptered out to Hawaii by the U.S. government. What's left are the people. And at that moment, our show turns off all the disco lights and turns the house lights up. And it's kind of shockingly bare. And Moses comes on stage, and you hear the strum of his guitar, and it's the first time you hear real acoustic music the entire night. And then he sings this protest song about people standing up against their government that was not serving them. And it's a powerful moment. And the music is meant to symbolize freedom and the freedom that the people were taking back. And I hope that that's why she was crying, because that moment is so cathartic, and it's a release, and the acknowledgement that the power is always in the hand of the voter if you protect that democracy. And that when you stop mindlessly following the crowd of a disco and turn the lights on, then that's where real power is. And that's why the music stands as power.
It is really powerful. I could see why she was crying.
Yes.
I think I was crying too. But she was full on, didn't care, no shame, just full on letting it go. And
I could have also kicked her in the head, you know.
I
know.
know.
We're dancing, and sometimes I just so I was like, oh my God, my head, I'm crying. Oh no.
That's why I'm crying. Oh my gosh. Oh, anyway. I just want to remind everybody that we are going to get to questions. So if you have them, please walk up to the microphones. But the last question is that, Jose, you are a Broadway veteran. You started your career as a freshman in college, and you see
back in the 40s, you know.
No, what elixir are you taking? And you see this full Filipino cast for the first time, and a lot of them, like a large handful of them, are making their Broadway debut. What advice have you given to them as their kuya, which is older brother in Tagalog?
You know, it's a powerful thing to see a lot of young Filipinos. I'm 47, and I never shy at saying how old I am, because I'm really proud of it. I've been working on Broadway for almost 30 years now, and I think the opportunities that Asian Americans have on Broadway and in theater in general is so different from when I started auditioning 30 years ago. Back in the late 90s, you would go to an audition, and in your face they would say, "Oh no, we're not seeing people like you today," and you would take that as code, you know. But nowadays, people are more open to seeing different races and ethnicities for shows in a way that was very different 30 years ago, even 10, 15 years ago, and I'm proud of that. And I think. And I look at these young people and I think, well, it's a little easier for you, and thank God. You know, I'm glad you don't have to live through what I did 30 years ago when I was auditioning for shows. And I love that these young kids are excited to be a part of the theater community and to be a part of the Broadway community. And the only advice I ever give anybody is just to be kind and to treat people on stage and backstage the way you would treat your mother. You know, and that's what people remember, you know, and when you work long enough, I look back at my career and I remember the people that treated me well, and that I learned kindness from those people. And the people who don't treat you well, you can forget very quickly. So
my advice to people starting out is always to believe that you deserve to be there. And for me, that really changed because of Lea Salonga. because when I was little, I grew up listening to that Miss Saigon album over and over and over again. So because to now be in a show, you know, that was produced alongside her, and to open the show with her starring in in the show with a dressing room right next door, like it just feels incredible for me because she changed my belief in what was possible. And now we're performing in the same theater where she performed Miss Saigon and won her Tony Award. So that's crazy.
Yes, yes. So amazing. Thank you for all of your information sharing and your knowledge sharing and your stories. We're going to transfer over to our audience questions. And the first one is from KP. Hey, KP. He says, growing up, I never saw Filipinos in the limelight, much less an all-Filipino cast. So, maraming salamat for representing our culture on the big stage. That means thank you very much. Here Lies Love aside, how can we continue to uplift and support minority-led POC-forward stories so that they gain the attention and the runtime they deserve?
My first instinct is to support the creators, not just the actors. Like we get a lot of the attention because we're on stage, but a lot of the POC-led stories are the writers. You have to find them and give them funding, you know, and give them opportunities to tell their story, tell our stories, and put them in positions of power. I mean, I think the only time I started seeing things really start changing in the theater industry is when I started seeing people we call behind the table. When there were people of color who were not only directors, but they were also the casting directors, and they were the writers and the choreographers and the lyric writers and the book writers. That's everything. Like those are the people who make the big decisions. And when you're telling stories, you obviously you tell your own personal experience. You write what you know. You know, and I think that's where I think I always try to search out for writers. When I meet someone at a theater or an industry party and I find out someone's a songwriter and they happen to be Filipino or Asian American or whatever, I try to make a mental note, or I exchange contact information and say, hey, let's help each other out.
And in terms of supporting those stories, it's just about really buying tickets and telling people to go see it and making sure that they get the attention they deserve and the positive reviews. If you can leave a review, there's a website called showscore.com. For every Broadway show, you can leave a review there. And I think it's just getting people to want to hear those stories, and your voice matters in that.
Yeah. Absolutely. You never really think about that. You only think about the people that you see, but really the people that are behind the stage and creating those stories who have to be dedicated and have to have their heart in that product to actually make it come true and make it be on stage is a real like whatchamacallit, life's work sort of side. We have a question from the audience. Yes.
First, I just want to say I had the privilege of seeing both of y'all perform last night, and it was absolutely phenomenal. So, you know, in keeping with what you just said, it's not show score, but recommendation to everyone here. It was phenomenal. But I'm fascinated by the comment you said where 95% of the lyrics were taken from kind of real, quotes or maybe some from the journal. Is there a way where like we can find all of that? Like I just frantically, like as soon as you said that, I like pulled up like Here Lies Love on like Genius Lyrics, and I know, Here Lies Love itself is something she said, when looking at like his entombed body. But I'm wondering, like, I'd love to know where all those different lyrics came from. Is there like a book out there or something where I can like connect
There
the
should
dots?
be. There really should be. And I don't think that there is, but
Right.
I will tell David you said this. Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, you're right. Here Lies Love is from a documentary that Imelda said, actually, that Here Lies Love are the words that she wants on her tombstone. She said, don't even put my name there, just put Here Lies Love. And
The great Ramona Diaz did the documentary. It's from almost 20 years ago, called Imelda. It's fascinating. I think the whole thing's on YouTube. You can watch the whole thing.
it is, yeah. But I'll tell David you said that. I think it's such a good idea.
Yeah, and I'd absolutely love to read that. And again, thank you both for an amazing performance that I saw last night.
We have another question from the audience.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for being here. I'm actually from out of town, from Chicago, and I'm actually seeing you guys tonight, so I'm very excited. But there's so many other Filipino communities around the country, especially in the Chicago area. Is there any future of this show ever touring at all? And if not, just how can we kind of continue to support the show after this Broadway run?
Good question.
Yeah, good question. I mean, we you know as much as we know. I mean, I think obviously it's a hard show to tour in as the physical show that we are. It's a very immersive show. You have to, but who knows? I think that's obviously in talks. We actually have one of our associate producers here. Like, I think there's got to be a life after Broadway, and I think there's actually already talks about it being produced in Australia and also in Japan. So. But other than that, touring around the U.S. I think is probably would be a great thing for more people to see it. So we'll see.
It would have to be a non-traditional touring route, though, because we can't really be in the normal Broadway theaters all across the country.
Right, yeah. Cool, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Oh, and we have another one.
Hi. I actually submitted a Dory question, but my name is Joe, so you could just skip over it when you get there. So I saw the play with my family in August for my dad's birthday. Towards the end, at that last 10% part when it was like the acoustics, I looked to my right, I saw him tearing up and like wiping his eyes, just being caught up in the emotion of reliving everything that he lived through, because he only came to the U.S. in 1989. So, and I might have missed this because I came in like 15 minutes late, but like, how does it feel, being that representation, sharing that story, all these things that like my parents lived through and everyone in their age bracket, just being able to tell that now and sharing it forward?
It's such an honor. I feel so much pride whenever we meet people who lived through this or know people who lived through this. I feel like we are doing our families proud, and for me, I'm so proud, and it feels. I think the pride also comes from a place of feeling like not only am I telling my family's history, but I'm telling our family's history. I'm telling the world about what happened in the Philippines and about the resilience of the Filipino people. So for me, I feel like I'm doing such a bigger service than just performing in a Broadway show.
And the need is so immediate right now. You can't. Maria Ressa has come to the show twice now. She's this Nobel Peace Prize winning journalist who founded Rappler in the Philippines, and she's one of the few people who are standing up to this false information network that's happening in the Philippines and how social media has taken over history and basically understanding of what the Marcoses were to Filipino history. And I think she reminded us that, we all have to play a part in making sure people know their history and what the truth is, because it's immediate right now. Like Bongbong is the president of the Philippines right now. The son of these two weirdos is now president of the Philippines, and there is literal there is video of people talking about Bongbong, saying how his parents were so great for the country, and they're trying to replace history with this false narrative. And I think it's important that we tell people what martial law actually was, the number of people who died, how the Supreme Court was dissolved, how so many rights were taken away by an entire generation of people in the Philippines. So to answer your question, I feel nothing but pride. And I feel like we have purpose to what we're doing, and we get to play two really terrible people. But what we do, and I always say this, it's like our job is to seduce the company, seduce the show, seduce the audience, and then turn on them and take advantage of that trust. And that's exactly what the Marcoses did to the Philippines.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. And one quick follow-up. Can you give me like one of the books you read as you were preparing, just so I can look into it more? Do you have a book recommendation?
What's the Imelda's book? The big one that David.
The Untold Story.
The Untold Stories of Imelda by
Romualdez.
Carmen.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll look into it.
But we were saying earlier, like when you read a source, when you find a source about the Marcoses, you got to research the source as well to see
Do your research.
Who
That's
that
why I
person
figured
was.
to ask someone who researched
You know, like David
There's also
Byrne. Byrne had this box of books. You know what I mean? And he like.
But I do want to say there's a Here Lies Love info page online where you can actually see a lot of the research that the creators have put together for the audience members to see the stuff that went behind every single moment in our show and every single song in our show. You can see research on the website.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm sad to say that we're out of time. I know, I could go on forever, but I just want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank you both for being here and sharing your talents and your stories and just being here and just kind of like feels like a warm family and we're just having a conversation. If you haven't seen the show, please go see it. Go Here Lies Love here at the Broadway Theater, 53rd and Broadway. That's about it. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time at Talks at Google. Bye. Thank you.